Look at this. I just drag this cinematic chord progression here, and you see all these curves and lines. If we go here, all these dynamics, and you see how the notes overlap a little bit, and you see how these three notes that would repeat are merged already. This is instant cinematic sound. Let me just create another region here so you can see it's ready to play on top, and it's instant inspiration. Check this out. And this is just 20% of what we've got ready for you. Let's talk about what makes a cinematic chord progression sound cinematic. So I'll go here to minor, open the full strings. I'll drag the last one because I like it. And I'll drag it here. It's a strings ensemble patch. Boom. And then on top of that, I'll explain this in a second. I'll drag the double basses and the definition layers. Let's start with the definition layers again, number 50, which is the last one here. See that it copied these two MIDI regions. And now I'm going to go to double bass and I'll drag the number 50. All right, cool. So we've got this build. Let's take a listen to this. Alright, to me this sounds fire as f. So as you can see, this sounds cinematic. Why? Well, three things. First, cinematic harmonies, cinematic dynamics, and cinematic sounds. Let's take these one at a time. So I'll show examples real quick, but number one, cinematic harmonies. It is not just about choosing the right chords, it's about a few more things like voice leadings, what type of extensions. If not, your music will not sound cinematic. It may sound more jazz or pop or ADM. That's the first thing. Second thing is cinematic dynamics. This is where most strings mockups fall apart. Real strings have natural dynamic movement that's incredibly difficult to program manually. I'll show you how to do this in a second. And number three, cinematic sound through proper layering. This is a counterintuitive technique that I'll show, but this is what's going to make your strings sound rich and with detail and open them and make sound wider and deeper. And I'll show you how I do this right now. And the more you do this, the faster you are. But still, creating all of these elements from scratch takes some time. And let's be honest, when you are working on a deadline, the creative part should be working on melodies and themes and harmony, not spending hours on technical MIDI programming. And there are times where you are not on a deadline, you're just maybe creating, but you just don't want to deal with all the technical stuff. You just want to be creating. And that is why we created the cinematic chord progressions for strings, which are really cool because they are, number one, truly idiomatic chord progressions that have been voiced specifically for the strings section to sound cinematic. Number two, they've got proper voice leading to make them sound cinematic. They include dynamics and they also include layering for extra depth, width, and detail. All right, so we've said that there are three things that are going to make your strings sound cinematic, right? Number one, harmonies. Look at all of these chord progressions. And we've analyzed the most iconic film scores, both classic and modern, to create chord progressions with authentic, not just chord progressions, but also the right voicings, the right extensions to make them sound cinematic. And this alone is huge because even when you choose the right chords, if your voicing is wrong or if you are using extensions that you shouldn't be using, it'll sound more like pop or ADM than film score. For example, check this one out. For example, 38. And by the way, this is how the voice leading has been designed. So we've got violins 1, 2, violas, cellos. Notice there is no double basses. I'll explain this later because double bass is double cellos down an octave. And that is why we include the double basses here separated. But 3 voices, violin 1, 2 in unison, violas, cellos. 4 voices, 1, 2 violas, cellos. 5 voices with divide the cellos. 6 voices would design this to divide cellos and violas, but for some chord progressions you can divide violins. But don't worry, this is for nerds. You don't need to know any of this. Just drag and drop and hit play. And it sounds so amazing, but notice how the notes start a little bit earlier. See, this creates a little bit of an overlap to avoid that drop between chords. To help avoiding that drop between chords, when the notes repeat, they are merged. And finally, take a look at the dynamics, how they make the music breathe. And let's talk about dynamics, because that's the second thing. First thing is cinematic harmonies. The second thing is cinematic dynamics. So take a look at these curves. We've got 1, 2, and then we've got this one here, 3. This first one here is modulation CC number 1, and this controls the crossfading between the different dynamic layers. See? Second, we've got this expression CC11, and this is just pure volume. It doesn't change the timbre, it doesn't crossfade between dynamic layers, but it enhances dynamics even further. This is counterintuitive, but you have to do it because at the end of the day, sample libraries are not just samples. A sample library is an instrument, but it is a simplification of the real strings section. And so just crossfading between the different dynamic layers would still sound limited compared to the real thing. Adding expression, that volume on top of the crossfading, enhances dynamic, making it sound closer to the real thing. And notice that these dynamics haven't been written like this, right? They don't look like this. They have been performed. They have been recorded live, because that's a trick with sample libraries. If you treat them as a real instrument and you perform them, you introduce a little bit of the human imperfection, the type of imperfection that makes the music sound better. And number 3, what you can see here is CC2, which is breath controller. This controls vibrato. As you can see, we've included the chord progressions with all these dynamics included and without dynamics included for those of you who want to program the dynamics yourself. But just for comparison, let's hear the difference between the same chord progressions with and without dynamics. We'll start without dynamics. And with dynamics. And while for some of you this is obvious, well, we've got to record dynamics, obviously, still takes time and expertise to record real pro dynamics that get the most out of your libraries. All right, so we've said that to get that strings, chord progressions, cinematic sounds, we needed 3 things. First were harmonies, second dynamics, and third, I'll show you a layering technique that's counterintuitive, but will add depth and width and detail to your strings chord progressions. And in essence, it works like this. You first use a strings ensemble sustain patch. And then on top of that, you're going to layer it with a violins 1 section legato patch and a cellos section legato patch, like this. And then the cellos, just 2 notes, C and the F, like this. And boom, all of a sudden you add first width, second detail, and third that legato realism. I'll hit play and halfway I'll mute the violins 1 and cellos section, and you see how all of a sudden you lose all that detail, width, and realism. Here we go. I mean, the string sustain still sound good, but for a truly cinematic sound with depth and width and detail and realism, this makes a huge difference. And I've done this, what I just showed you, a million times. That's why I've done it very, very quickly. That's why we included, see here, minor and major, we include the definition layers, and they are numbered, so they match the chord progressions, obviously. By the way, all of these files that you see, this is a condensed version that I'm using for this video, but when you download your MIDI packs, your chord progressions, each one of these chord progressions that is in C, see that all of them start in C. In your file, you'll have them transposed in each one of the 12 keys. But going back to the definition layers, for example, if we choose, what should we use now? Major or minor? Let's go with minor, full strings. Let's go with 14, maybe. Nice. Okay, so now let's add the definition layers. That was 14. So we're going to grab 14. Again, just drop it here down below, and you'll see that, boom, it'll split in violin 1 legato and cello legato patches. And what I'll do is I'll mute and mute the definition layers as I play this back. Here we go. So these are the three things that are going to make your strings sound more cinematic, but I'll show you a fourth trick, which is cinematic music compared to just realistic orchestral music has a little bit more of low end, extended but controlled low end. And that is why we included here the double bass, so you can control the low end in two different ways. Number one, you can just add the double bass layer to the double bass section legato patch. So this is going to be subtle, but it adds bottom end and depth to the strings. Here we go with and then without. Without. Now with. So you can add it here and use a realistic double basses section legato patch, or you can use the typical sub synth. Now you want to be careful with this one because it can add a lot. So it's a tad too much, but you see what this does. All right, so this is how you go from kind of like meh strings to truly cinematic strings chord progressions. See, the right harmony, the right chords, idiomatic, that work for strings, and the right type of voicings to make it sound cinematic, dynamics to make them sound alive, and then layers to add depth, realism, and width. Now, out of these three, writing the chords is the only true creative part of the process. Dynamics and layering, you have to do it anyway. It's part of the process, but it's craftsmanship, essentially. You have to do it to increase realism and to make them sound more cinematic, but it's always the same. And so that's why we created the cinematic chord progression, so you can leverage, you can just drag and drop the dynamics and layers, so you don't have to rewrite them all the time. And you can always switch the harmonies. This is how I use them, and there are four different ways, but the one that I use the most is I use them for speed, not even inspiration. I use them for speed. I first select a chord progression that's close to what I want. I drag it here. This is number 11. Then I grab the definition layers, number 11. I drag them here. Boom. And with that, I've got a starting point. I know how this sounds. And then I select all of them, and remember, all the dynamics, everything that needs to happen for the strings to sound cinematic is already there. Now I may want to change a few chords or a few notes, and that is what I do. I may want to go a little bit darker, so instead of going from C minor to A flat major, I'm going to go to an augmented chord, so I'm going to move that E here. I'm going to split this E here, boom, cut, and I'm going to go from E flat to E. And so now it sounds darker. And now I've got what I want. And on top of that, I start composing. Maybe a piano, something like... And maybe I can move this to violins too, and then add a strings melody here, like... Maybe we can add a second piano here. And boom, in a few minutes, we've got a perfect starting point. We tweaked a few notes, added the melody, a couple of counter melodies, and all together sounds like this. And sounds pretty damn convincing for a sort of suspense cue, and this is the first way I use them for speed. I'll drag in a progression similar to what I need, and since all the dynamics and layers are already done, I just need to adjust a few notes to fit my harmony, and then I can add the stuff on top. It's much faster than building everything from scratch. The second way I use this is just for inspiration. Sometimes I'll just drag in a few progressions and I'll improvise melodies over them until something clicks. It is a really fun way to find that inspiration or spark that your music needs. And for this, I want initially drag the definition layers. Let's go major this time. I'll grab just a few chord progressions. Let's go with 25 this time. And then let's go with a similar one, 38, not to the piano, to the strings. There you go. That's this one. Let's grab some horns, something like... Or maybe for this one, something like... So we've got these two, not perfect, but it's a starting point that allows me to compare kind of like the feel that I'm looking for. So same sort of rhythms in these both melodies, but a slightly different feel. We've got this one. And then this second one. And I don't use this one as often, but sometimes it comes in handy. It's incredibly useful when you're a little bit stuck. Just drag a few chord progressions, start improvising on top, and sometimes this helps you find the idea and keep moving. A third use for these chord progressions is literally for learning. You can just drag a few of these chord progressions. Let me get rid of this time signature change. And just go in here and analyze what chord progressions make the strings sound cinematic. What type of extensions are quote unquote allowed in this genre or to create that type of feeling, because some of them will create a more open and bright type of feeling and others will sound darker. How is this done? And then also you can analyze how the dynamics have been recorded. So we've got 4 uses. Number 1 for speed, second inspiration, number 3 for learning, and number 4 for practice. I'll literally use this as a backing track and I'll practice my melodic writing to test different orchestral ideas or to test different orchestral instruments. For example, messed up at the end. But this is so much fun. And again, remember, cinematic music, realistic orchestral writing comes down to being able to perform the instruments, not treat them as sample libraries, but treat them as actual instruments. And this is so much fun when it comes to practicing the skill of performing sample libraries. And if you are thinking, but these chord progressions will make me sound like everyone else, not really. Like, these are just your foundation. This is literally the background layer. The entire music is built on top of that support. It is so subtle underneath everything else, but it does give you a solid cinematic foundation. And on top of that, again, you can change notes. You've seen me do this and change the entire thing. But again, the dynamics and everything else that you have to do it anyway, but take time, and it's not even creative, it's already done for you. So here's what we've put together for you. We've got two options. We've got option A, which is $24 here on YouTube. This generally sells for $47 on our website, and it includes all the cinematic chord progressions for strings in both major and minor keys, but without the dynamic programming. Option B is just $10 more, $34. Now, this is a special price for you guys watching on YouTube. Regular price later on is going to be $67, and it includes everything in the option A, plus the fully programmed dynamics version with all the controller data. It also includes the definition layers for added realism and the double bass layers for extended low end. So that's that. We've got two options, option A, option B, 24, 34. On top of that, we're including some bonuses. For the first 100 people who choose option B, you'll also get the MIDI examples that I've shown in these videos. You can see exactly how I built these demonstrations. That's for the first 100 people, and it's the first bonus. We have a second bonus, and it's for the first 150 people that get option B. You'll also get the composing recipes, printable PDF, which is a guide to all the major cinematic composing styles, including love, sadness, suspense, tension, action, fantasy, and more, with specific instructions on harmony, orchestration, counterpoint, melody, and rhythm for each style to be able to compose music in each one of these cinematic styles. All right, that's it. This is incredibly powerful stuff. With these cinematic chord progressions, you'll instantly elevate the quality of your strings writing. You'll save hours of tedious MIDI programming. Number three, you'll learn professional techniques by studying the examples. And number four, you'll create more emotional cinematic music immediately. And we created these files, this MIDI pack, to give you speed. That's the number one goal with these string cinematic chord progressions, but because I also know how frustrating it is to have great musical ideas but get stuck in the technical implementation. And as you see, these aren't just chord progressions, they are professional strings arrangements that will make your composition sound instantly more cinematic. You can use them for speed, for inspiration, to get ideas flowing, or to learn. Link in description if you want to get the cinematic chord progressions for strings. Now, let's write great music that sounds as emotional and cinematic as it deserves to sound.